Okay, everyone. Thank you and welcome back. Next speaker, Anders from Attentech. Very interesting, creating successful IT solutions. So, big applause for Anders.
Thank you, Magnus. It's a great honor to be here today, and I'll be talking about how to create successful IoT solutions. But I'd like to start with a vision for IoT. Why should we use IoT? We've been talking about connecting products, devices, etc. today, but why should we do it? And I think there are a number of reasons for doing that. The first one is to really create digital transformation. We're doing that today and moving a lot of processes, work we do from paper to the digital form and making us work much more efficient. But think about it, once we connect everything, we can really know about our products, our buildings, our ships, whatever we're working with, what condition they are in, if we need to change anything in order to operate them in a good way. So I believe that this will really propel digital transformation into the future. And another thing we can achieve with IoT is to make the world a much safer place. We can know about things that is about to happen and hopefully even predict them before they happen. So we can make it much safer for our equipment, for people, for the environment. So also making this digital transformation, making it safer, we can make the world much more sustainable also. We can operate everything at an optimal or almost optimal level, and making sure that we reduce the amount of energy we use, etc. Having said that, my name is Anders Englund. I work every day as a CEO of Attentech and also one of the four owners of the company. My everyday life is to use IoT technology to help organizations and customers improve their business, creating new businesses. And my background is a Master of Science in Computer Science and Engineering from Linköping University and Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. And I've been working for the last 35 years to use technology in order to assist companies and organizations to develop them and their businesses. Interestingly enough, I studied artificial intelligence in the mid-80s at Case Western Reserve University, and it's great to see that that's a hot topic again. And I'll get back to that a little bit later. Today, we'll talk about creating successful IoT solutions. We talk about the four most important challenges, and we'll see a lot of connections to Adam and Irfan's presentations earlier today. I'll mention a couple of trends which I think are important for IoT, and then we'll have a short summary about what Attentech is doing in this field, and also a quick summary of the presentation. And please feel free to ask any questions in the chat as well, so Magnus will tell me if there are any questions. And I'd like to try this out. Magnus started in the beginning, but we can please write a plus sign in the chat if you're using IoT today, or a minus sign if you don't use it.
Yeah, let's see. People, plus or minus? Right now, Anders, you only have a plus from us, for me.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Then there are lots of new things to learn today. There are plenty of IoT solutions around us. We have a lot of household machinery that's connected. I installed a new washing machine a year ago. And the first thing I had to do when I installed it was to give it my email address and also the Wi-Fi connection. So it's connected to my Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, the producer of this washing machine, Miele, they never told me what good that was for me. So I still don't really know what it's doing. I hope they're monitoring it or maybe updating the software, but I don't know. And I think that's a real failure, that they're not being able to tell me what the use is of this product. We see a lot of commercial products like cars, ships being connected, But are those applications really successful or not? I tried to define that. And what is a successful IoT solution? Well, it's quite natural. It has to provide some kind of user value. If I'm not happy with that value, I won't be using that solution. And of course, the organization of the people behind that kind of solution has to earn a business value from that. Otherwise, they won't be able to operate that solution for a long time. So those are sort of basics. But there are other things to consider because these systems tend to live for a long period of time. So there has to be able to be, you need to be able to adapt them and develop them for new users, new values, maybe new functions that will evolve over time. And of course, they need to be secure. If we don't trust them and our data is lost somehow, we're not going to use them. And they also need to be available. If I'm going to use this IoT solution and it's not there for me when I need it, I will probably try it once or twice and probably not after the third time that it's not available. I'm never going to use it again. Again, has sort of the same kind of issue. It has to have the right quality for me. It doesn't mean to have the highest quality, but it should be the right quality for the application I'm looking at. And naturally, it has to comply with laws and regulations. So let's now look into these 4 most important challenges. And I like to say that starting with the business value, if this application doesn't provide a business value, it will never last. And looking at the kind of business value that you can produce, they typically end up in 3 different categories. It's about improving internal efficiency, it's about reducing risk, internal risk or risk for the company, and it's also about creating new services, increased turnover, new services that you sell to your customers, new applications. And if you study these applications, the most common one, or the leftmost one on this picture, the improved efficiency. And then fewer applications are within the reduced risk, and even fewer with the increased turnover. And the first 2, they're mostly often internal application where you improve your own organization. And those are rather easy to duplicate by competitors. So it's important to set a strategy for also having IoT solutions which provide services to the end user. That way you will make it harder for the competition to just copy your solutions. So start with the improved efficiency, reducing risk, but aim for also providing new services to your customer. We'll look into each of these 3 areas and give some examples of them. If we start with the improved efficiency, one of the most common cases is to look at condition-based maintenance. If our product is connected and we know the status of it at all times, we can make predictions based on its current status. Today, the most normal or the common cases of maintenance is done after some kind of time period, operational hours or calendar hours, or when it fails. And if you do it on a time-based, it's always too early if it's not broken. And if it's broken, then it's too late, which is the same thing if you do it based on the catastrophic case when it's broken. So one of our customers, Carbex, they do the brushes that transform the current in windmills from the rotating part to the static parts. And they have a lifespan from between 1 to 2 years. And in a windmill park, you typically have 100 different windmills. So when they replace them, they replace all of them at the same time because they're out at sea or up on a mountaintop. So it's a bit difficult and dangerous to climb up there. So they do them all at the time. So in the past, they used to replace them after 1.5 years. And you really didn't know if it was good or not. So we have helped them to design a solution where you can measure the wear and also measure other parameters like humidity and temperature, and then make a prediction of the lifespan that remains of these brushes. So now the owners of a windmill park, just looking at an app, can see, okay, this park has about 4 months left before we need to do something, or it has a year left, 1.5 years. So they can really be much, much more efficient in their operation. Other applications are like Scania's fleet management systems, where you have moving things, and you need to reschedule in real time. When something happens, a truck breaks down, someone is sick, a new demand appears somewhere, then you can immediately, you know where all your resources are, and you can make an almost optimal plan, new plan for using those resources. Another important or interesting area is to look at how people are operating things. We call it optimized behavior. Consilium is a company, they make the black boxes for ships. And the black boxes, they can basically record anything on those ships. Consilium used to call them the world's most expensive USB memories, because the ship owners, they had to take these black boxes, send them to Consilium, get the data out, and then send them back again. Now they're connected with satellite phones, and the ship owner can just download. You don't get the data in real time because it's rather expensive with satellite communication. So you have to ask, okay, I want data from this ship in the Indian Ocean last week, and you get the data. And you can see how the crew is operating the ship, and 80 to 90% of the cost of running a ship is fuel consumption. So actually to be able to mentor the ship's crew and how they're operating the ship is critical for the profitability of the operation.
Yeah, I jump in with a question. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. But I mean, you're looking at, is there like automation, or will there be automation of steering ships? Because you have, the ocean is so wide. If you compare, if you could have a self-driving cars, then self-driving ships sounds easier. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's more trickier. Maybe you don't know that.
I haven't seen that much. Personally, I think that would be easier to have ships. I know there are. I think it was this week. There was a ship. Was it KTH was going to send a ship, autonomous ship, to Åland next summer, I think.
Oh.
So I think there are lots of tests going on, and for sure within the navies around the world there are a lot of autonomous ships going on, and we've been working with these remotely operating vehicles that you have underwater, and I don't think they're completely automatic yet, but they're looking at use cases where you can automate their behavior. So I think we'll go that way also in that area.
Yep.
Okay, so that was the improved efficiency. Another area which is about reducing risk, and that's typically if you're working in a high-risk environment, like if you're working alone in a forestry machine, or if you're working like Interspiro, their customers are firefighters. They had to go into the fire, and they have this equipment on them so they can breathe. And the rescue leader has the ability to measure and see if they're standing up, what their temperature is, what their heart rate is, and if there are also a positioning system, so they can decide when it's time to go in and you need to take one of these guys out of there, or girls for that sake. Also, since you know where all these connected things are, you can also reduce the risk for theft. Haldex is a company producing brakes for trucks. They have a positioning device. So for some kind of cargoes, the insurance companies today, they require that you have Haldex equipment or some other kind of positioning equipment. Because if you're transporting tobacco, alcohol, or electronics, so one truckload can be worth millions of crowns. And there is actually one case where the police, they could go to the parking lot where the thieves were unloading the cargo, and they could catch them right there because they had this positioning system, so they knew where it was. Another good use of IoT is also to make sure that you monitor parameters during the lifespan of transportation of goods. For example, Thermo King, if you're transporting cooled goods, you cannot break the cold chain. And using IoT, you can monitor it during the entire transportation and make sure you can have a proof to your customers that you've actually fulfilled those regulations. And the last area, which I think is very important, we collect all this data, like Consilium data, collecting these data from the black boxes. Now they can sell it to their customers, the ship owners, so they can have control of all of their ships, no matter where they are around the world. Another case, there's a company called VSM. They make high-end sewing machines. There are two brands, Viking and Pfaff. And they were selling these machines around the globe. They had no idea who the end user were. So by connecting these machines using Wi-Fi and adding a touch color screen to the machines, not all of their customers, but a large portion of the customer base connected their machines. And suddenly they have a direct communication channel with their end users. So they can provide their customers with much better value, because they can see how the customers use the machine. They can see if there's a problem with it. They can offer new designs. You see this pattern on the picture here. The machines can actually, if you take a picture with your cell phone and download it into the machine, it can embroider it on a piece of cloth or a t-shirt. And the users can also design their own designs, and they could trade them between each other. So you create a lot more customer loyalty by having this sewing machine connected. And finally, you can also create completely new businesses or new business models. We talk about product as a service. We use that with Spotify and other products today. It's not that common with products because it's a very hard transition, as we learned from Irfan, right, to move that way. It's both a new business model and new technology. One example is Rolls-Royce, their aircraft engines. For example, SAS, they don't own their engines today. They lease them from Rolls-Royce and pay the captain of the plane. He will actually downgrade the engine and say, okay, we only need 70% of the engine to this start, and they don't have to pay as much because it's the last percentage of power from the engine that really wears it down. And another example is all these electric kick bikes that I love to hate or hate to love. Their business model wouldn't be possible at all without having them connected. It's really part of that to see where they're located and how much they're charged, etc. So those are the three most common ways of creating business value using IoT. And of course, once you've decided on where you want to be with your business, you have to come up with a technical solution. And I will stand in the choir just behind Adam. It is a complex world, so there are a lot of things to consider. And it's very hard for one organization to master all of that. But there is a network of partners that you could use that can help you out in those areas. This is a typical architecture for an IoT application. At the bottom middle, we have the connected devices that communicates data somehow to a backend where you have a web server and database storing the data which transmitted up there. At the backend, you also do analysis of those data. You probably need to integrate it with your customer relationship systems, probably also some product databases and economic systems, so to make real analysis. And then you provide those data to different user groups. And you might also, in some cases, you actually control the devices which are connected if you have actuators in them. And if the communication between the devices and the backend are SIM-based, you need to have some kind of connection to an operator also, which are indicated in the top right corner there. We're going to look into some of these parts, and I'll start with the connecting devices. And on the connected device, you have sensors providing you with data. You might also have actuators if you want to influence the environment around the connected device. And then those sensors go via a gateway to communicate to the backend. And to select that gateway is really, really hard. And don't start at the technical level when you're doing this. Start at the business model and what kind of value, what kind of cost can your application carry? Because there are so many choices. Adam has a really lightweight gateway that you can use. There are others which are much more powerful and also cost a lot more. And there are different uses for all of those different gateways. Things you have to consider is, do you need edge computing? That drives how much data you should be able to handle, how much processing capacity you need, how much software you need, what kind of interfaces you need. They talk about southbound interfaces that's going down into the connected devices and northbound going up to the cloud. What kind of interfaces do you need? The environment, typically, is it humid? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it dusty? But also the geography. It's a mess with certifications. If you're using your gateway within the EU, it's easy. You need a CE certification. But you also need to certify the radio aspects of the product. And there is no one single global certification that you can use. And in some countries, you need specific certifications. And in some operators, they also require certification. So that's a hard part. So you need to know where your application will be deployed before you select the gateways.
I have a question there, Anders.
Sure.
I mean, you talked about ships, and they move around the world, but maybe satellite communication is kind of standardized in the world?
Satellite communication is global, and you don't need to certify the devices there in a global basis because the ships have a home harbor, and probably that, I guess those laws and regulations apply to it, so there it's easier. And also power availability and energy consumption. Many times you do have a lot of power and then it's not a problem. But sometimes you need battery and then it's a driving force. So selecting the devices is hard. But start with the business model, understand where your application will be deployed in order to select the right one. The next thing I'd like to talk to is the communication between the connected devices and the back end. And again, here there are so many different choices. I think most of the time we think about the mobile networks, the 2Gs to 4Gs, 5Gs, and they are good for, they're global, they're good for a lot of applications. But again, if you're going for a global deployment, so in Africa, many countries, they still only have 2G. 3G is discontinued in a lot of countries. 4G is available almost in all of the world. There are a lot of 5G networks being built right now. So again, if you're looking at the global deployment, you probably need to support a few of them to have a good coverage there. There are local radio networks that you can use also. I won't go into all of those today, but they might be good solutions for you. Interesting are the low power wide area networks that you can use. There are a number of proprietary ones like Sigfox, LoRa, and Ingenu, which are designed for IoT. For example, LoRa, you can set up your own base station and have devices that communicate not that much data, rather seldom, but then you can have battery lifespans for maybe a couple of years with that kind of applications. If you're using mobile networks, they tend to use a lot more data and you can't have that kind of battery lives. It requires that you have a power source to those applications. But then again, there are some cellular versions available, narrowband IoT and LTE Cat-M, that's for machine type communications. They are designed to have low rate of data and lower battery requirements. So there are a number of cellular global standards which are evolving now. Again, not all countries are investing in narrowband IoT. Europe is doing that, China is doing that, other countries are not. So again, you have to look at the geography where you are deploying your system. And don't underestimate it. Sometimes you have a fixed connection available, and that makes life a lot easier if you can use that instead. So communication is hard. I'm not going to go into these triangles, but I've copied them from Nord Stream, and it's interesting to see here. You cannot find. You have to balance these parameters. There's low energy consumption, high data rate of communication, and wide area coverage in the leftmost triangle, and you have to find in your application which one fits your requirements best. And the same thing in the right triangle, if you're looking at high quality of service and security, if it scales around the world, and the cost. So that could be a good guideline when you're selecting what kind of communication you need. And we're also going to look at the back-end side of the architecture. And here, I think it was Adam's advice was to use a platform. And in 2017, IoT Analytics tried to look at the market, how many platforms there were. And at that time, there were 450 different platforms on the market. And I guess it's not fewer today, 3 years later. But they asked their users about the platforms on the market, and they asked them to rate them in 2 different dimensions. First of all, the technology. Do they provide a good technology for IoT? And the user centricity, the x-axis on this chart, is does it provide user value? And out of that investigation came Amazon AWS IoT and Microsoft Azure IoT out at the top, and there are a couple of followers there behind. So this could be a good choice, a good way of looking at what are the most common platforms, and be careful when you select platform here, because a lot of these 450 or whatever they are today, they're not going to be around in a couple of years from now.
There I have a question, Anders. Do you see this as, I mean, when mobile phone came, so a lot of phone vendors were around, and today we see fewer phone vendors.
A lot less.
Or a lot less.
Yeah.
Is it the same thing here? Do you see it's like the leaders up there is either going to just take over the market, or will we see still disruption or new things emerge?
There are a lot of more specific niche platforms, and these at the top now, they're very general platforms, and one could think that the niche platforms could perform better within their areas. But I've seen studies and reports that Amazon and Microsoft, they have a lot of muscle, and they are being able to develop those platforms at such a pace and adding machine learning and other functionalities that these niche platforms will never be able to follow at that pace. So I think the recommendation right now is to go with one of the large players. So if it says, well, you see the one on the top right corner, I think it's the right choice. We have chosen to go with those 2, AWS and Microsoft Azure IoT platform. But those guys also know how to charge you licenses. And it's a bit difficult in advance to know what those costs are. So in some business cases, we end up basing them on open source platforms, because there are open source platforms also that you can use. So there are alternatives to using those platforms. There are disadvantages to open source platforms also. You have to make sure to update them, etc. And you won't have this kind of development as you have with AWS and Microsoft Azure. But if you can't carry those licensing costs, I think it's worth looking at that solution as well. Another issue to think about is security, integrity. There is a real threat to IoT-Solutions. Mirai, I don't know if you remember the Mirai malware. It was IP cameras connected to the internet. I think there were 130,000 were hacked, because it was the same username and password that was delivered from the factory that was used by the users. And the providers of these cameras hadn't forced the users to change them. So it was very easy to hack them, and they almost got the internet to break down in the US because they did a DDoS attack. And so there is a real threat to IoT solutions. There are hackers. They're doing this just to show that they can. There are activists. They will attack your IoT solutions because if they don't like you. There are criminals. They want to have your money, so they want to blackmail you. How much are you willing to pay if your car won't start tomorrow morning and you have to go to daycare with your kids and hurry to your important meeting at school? Is it worth 1,000 crowns? Probably. And there are also countries that are doing that. Even Sweden has an offensive cyber capability that you can read about that it was started, but you can't read about what they're doing for the obvious reasons.
A question around that. I mean, is there anything more? I never heard about this camera. Has there been any more attacks? I mean, this.
Yeah.
Yeah, there has. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you talked in the beginning about like connecting like a washing machine. It would be very frustrating if my washing machine wouldn't work one day, and I get a mail like, "Pay me this money, else."
I mean,
has there been any stuff like that? Also,
yeah,
there has. Okay.
now I can't remember the name of it, but there were a couple of years ago one that encrypted computers. There were, especially in the UK, hospitals that couldn't operate because all of their computers were encrypted. I can't remember the name of that right now. And they want you to pay ransomware, but I can't remember the name of that specific. So there are a number of cases like that. Don't pay, rule number one. There are also some programs that can actually retrieve the data. There are some sites you can look at. You can read Europol. They make an internet security report every year, which is European police, which is really important about, or interesting about in this area. Well, the thing is, the threat is, you always have a threat if you go out to the internet. And then you can reduce that threat by taking measures. I write sufficient security measures here. But you can never get to zero. The 100% solution doesn't exist. And there is also cost involved. So you have to decide what is acceptable for this solution, for my solution. And they then take that measures until that level. And obviously forcing users to set their own username and own password, that's quite easy. Then you move from up here. So there are cheap versions and there are more expensive ones you can do. So you should look at your application, think about what the risks are and how I should protect it. There are other issues also. You should be transparent with the data you collect and why you do it. So I, as a user, understand the value provided. I think my Miele washing machine does not fulfill that area. I don't know what you're doing with my data. And again, then there is GDPR that forces us to do the same thing. I still think it's a good thing to do with or without GDPR. British Airways, 2 years ago, someone put 16 lines of codes in their homepage. They stole 380,000 credit card data. 150 million Swedish crowns were withdrawn from those cards. I guess British Airways had to refund them. But then last year they got the fine because they broke GDPR. And that was 2 billion Swedish crowns. So it cost them a lot of money. So those were the technical issues you have to think about. I think Adam mentioned the competence businesses issue. There are a number of competencies you need to master in order to master a complete IoT solution. And you don't have to master all of those skills, but you should decide, make a decision on what competencies do you want to have in-house or which ones do you not want to have. And the same thing coming to organization. I think Irfan, you were close to the picture here on the left-hand side on this slide. Most companies start with proof of concepts, and then you always start with the technology for IoT. And I say that the technology for IoT, that's not the problem today. It's creating the business value. And it's when those two meet, that's when you have your successful IoT solutions. So you need to combine the technology and the business value in order to make this work. And one common error, at least in the past, was the R&D division or department making the proof of concept, and the business people weren't involved. So you should always from the start include the relevant parts of your organization, so there can be part and influence the project from the very beginning. And let it take time to learn. That was also on Irfan's slide. You need to learn internally how should we be able to use this technology, the new business models. We're not used to them in this organization. Can we use them? Will our customers accept them? Are they willing to pay for this way? So it will take time to get adapted to these changes. And also, what project roles do I want to take? Should I be the product owner? Should I be project manager? Should I handle the server, the platform, etc.? And we recommend that you always take the product owner role, because then you can control what kind of requirements, what kind of functionality your system should have. But all the other roles I think you could have with partners, with one partner or several partners, or yourself. But make a decision on where you want to be before you implement the system. Okay, those were the 4 most important challenges. We're looking at a couple of trends. And the first one is from Gartner, 2019 and 2020. And they say IoT, they love these nice keywords, slogans. IoT is the key to unlock digital business potential, and you should use IoT to renew and differentiate your business. They say it's not just a technology initiative anymore, which I think is very nice. And they focus much more on the business outcome than the technology today. And it's not only driven by the purpose of internal operation improvement. You remember the different business value. It's also about creating new businesses. I think the last bullet there is interesting. We see that when we advise companies having operations around the globe, that IoT solutions pop up everywhere. And it ends up in the CIO's knee eventually. And suddenly you have 10 different solutions which are completely different, and they have to manage them and operate them. And it becomes a real nightmare. So CIOs of large organizations should set up a policy or an architecture for IoT solutions so they'll be able to manage them efficiently in the future.
Yeah, I heard a question.
Sure.
I have a question, Anders. It's when the electricity network was developed. First, there was a lot of money spent into just building out, and now we have electricity everywhere. And then once we have that, we get we get lamps, we get stuff. So there opens a new market on top of that, in a sense. Do you see an on top of market once everything is connected through an IoT device? It's like, oh yeah, now we got everything. We have 50% devices connected in a house. At that point, will tip over, and we can develop a new business model, something on top of that. Because right now, I don't know, we could read the electricity meters live. We could, I don't know. You see where I'm going?
Yeah, maybe, but I think we're not there yet. If you look at buildings, there is a problem with, or a challenge with someone wants to connect the electricity meter, someone wants to connect the fans in the building, someone wants to connect the sewage pumps, someone wants to connect something else. And how are all that data going to be aggregated? There is no one platform today, and who is going to own it within the facility management area? So there is a lot of...
do you see regulation there?
Sorry?
Do you see regulation? EU coming in and saying we have to have some kind of, shared... This is usually someone else's data. I mean, the electricity company takes my data. The water company takes my data.
I haven't seen that, but I know...
have the right to share it. In a sense. Do you see where, you can have whatever platform, whatever vendor, but I could, as a user or owner of the actual data, say that I want you to share this data with this, so I can optimize something.
A lot of these companies operating within a facility, they don't want to share their data. It's the new oil. Well, the oil isn't worth anything. It's the new gold. So they're going to be very, very careful in sharing that data. Maybe we're going that way, you're saying, but I still think there is a problem to find out who is going to own that data, who is going to have that complete platform. And that is the same in many, many different niches where that has to be figured out first. Maybe then you can build new applications on top of that. Another trend, there is a problem if you deploy an IoT solution globally and you select one operator for that. You put a SIM card. There are many different versions. You can solder it in, or there are different kinds of SIM cards you can put in your device. But then you're stuck with that operator. And maybe you'd like to see some competition, or maybe you don't like them after a couple of years. And then it's hard. You have to go out to all those devices and replace that SIM card. There's a new standard called ESIM that's been around for a couple of years, and that consists of two parts. An EUICC, the telecom industry loves abbreviations. So that means an embedded UICC, and the UICC is a standard SIM card. That SIM card is the one you see up on top of the right. It can have a number of profiles for different operators. So you can actually, in the field, you can have the SIM card change operator. But in order to do that, you need something called a subscription management platform as well. So if your operator has a subscription management platform, you can be able, and the other operator also has a similar setup, then you can change operators out in the field, which is of course very good for you. There is a cost for it, for having and managing these subscription management platforms, and typically they end up with the end customer. So there is a cost to having this, but it enables also this change of operators, which is important. Another trend is 5G. There's a lot of hype around 5G. I think for most IoT applications today, it doesn't really matter. We can still deliver them with 5G or not. 5G will enable us to use higher frequencies, and operators will be able to aggregate different frequency spectrums in order to provide better data rates and better higher throughput in one cell, and that will be good for us as users of 5G. And for some cases, you also get better data throughput, so it will enable new IoT applications which are not possible today. But otherwise, I think you do not need to wait for 5G. You can apply your IoT solutions already today. And the final trend, artificial intelligence. All our customers are collecting data in the back end and making an analysis of those data with statistical and analytical methods. And of course, it's interesting to look at also pictures, film, text, and that kind of unstructured data, but that's hard to do analytically or statistically. And there, machine learning, artificial intelligence and machine learning, my topic, has come back again, where you can really there are good tools around today. Up till a year ago, all our customers were talking about this, and none had really deployed solutions like this. But in the last year, we have deployed a number of solutions using machine learning, and it turns out to be easier than what I expected. The tools provided by Microsoft and Amazon and Google and others, they're really good. You take them, and of course you need a lot of knowledge to select the right kind of model, and you train them from the data, and you can have an application running in maybe 2 to 3 months from starting. We have a webinar. We did an investigation about the usage of AI in Sweden today, and what kind of business value AI is used to create. And there is a webinar on Wednesday, October 21st. So there you can register on Attentec's homepage if you want to have information on how AI is used today.
Yeah, there are a question. I mean, the companies, organizations using AI, I mean, how much is the cost of return of investment there? It's like you said, like you can have a train model like 2-3 months. And do you see, like, is that revenue driven, or is it more like they want to learn and understand, or is it both?
I think it's quite early yet. So there is a lot of testing going on. But there is also revenue involved, or efficiency that can be used. We've used it for predicting arrival times for commuting traffic in order to see if the subtitled text on movies are correct, because there is an error, and it's really annoying if it's not correct. And you can't watch hundreds of hours of movies every week to find out that. But machine learning can find out and also see how much the difference is. So artificial intelligence is an interesting trend. I'd like to round up this presentation with saying a few words about what we do at Attentec. And we call ourselves an independent system integrator for the Internet of Things. And our specialty is to do the software. We are experts sometimes, or we deliver the complete solutions to our customers. We've been around for 15 years and have a turnover of a little bit over 60 million now, and are located in Stockholm, Linköping, and Oslo. And we work with our customers from a strategic workshop where we try to define the business value and the business model you should use using IoT. What kind of business value do you create? And once you know that, you know what kind of value, how much you can invest in this. So you can do a feasibility study where you design the technical solution to provide that business value, and then you can make an informed decision if this is the right investments to make. And then we can support the customer in developing the solution, putting that into operation, and also during its lifetime. So what we covered here was what is a successful IoT solution to really provide customer value and also business value to the owner of the system. We look at the most important challenges, how to create business value, the technology, which is complicated. There's a lot of technology competence involved, and also how you should organize it and think about and really involve all the parts of the organization. And finally, a few trends. And with that, I'd like to thank you all very much for listening and are open to questions.
Yeah, I have a question. I mean, there's no questions yet. If you have questions, please dump them in the chat. But I have one question. It's like, where do you, when you help your customer, when Attentech when you help your customers, where do you see, it's like, do they come to you to make stuff more efficient or to make more money? I mean, there's two, you understand, there's sometimes we make an investment in IT system to automate, to lower cost. Or we make an investment to sell more and earn more. Or is it both, maybe?
I think it has been both. I was thinking about the applications we've made over time. If you look at Carbex or Concilium or Micropower, that is a battery company, it's always about making things more efficient. Like the maintenance of Carbex, but of course they sell this solution to their customers. So they make the operation more efficient. Maybe they even will sell fewer brushes, because people will change them more at an optimum time, but they still sell another service to their end customer, which is new revenue. But of course, they will become more competitive if their competition don't have the similar service. So in a critical application, they will always choose Carbex. So I guess it's always both that we've seen.
Thanks. Do you guys have any questions? No? We don't have any questions so far in the chat, so I would like to thank you, Anders, for coming here. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Yes.
Thank you.
And here you go. Thank you. So now we'll take like 10-minute break again, and then Hanna, you're up. Thanks. And big applause also, of course.